welcome to tax lien investing, tax certificates, and there's a couple of different terms that you're going to hear me say throughout today. Tax lien, tax deed, tax certificates. Okay, so you're going to hear that throughout the day. It's a very innovative way to invest in real estate. It's one of the ways, by the way, that you can invest in real estate from afar. So it may be attractive to some of you that are interested in doing that. So what my objective is today is to really gain an overview of the world of tax foreclosure investing. And that's really what we're talking about here. There's many different types of foreclosures. This particular subject is about tax foreclosure, so I'm going to go into those in detail. We're going to use the tax foreclosure timeline to determine when to invest. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about how does a property get to tax foreclosures. We're going to identify and avoid major risk factors, because there is risk in tax lien or deed investing like everything else with real estate. We're going to explore the three methods of acquiring tax delinquent properties. And finally, we're going to learn how to use tax foreclosures as a part of possibly your retirement savings plan. Okay? So we'll talk about all of that here today. I know you guys are excited. I see the faces, and I see the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. What does that really mean, by the way? If I was bushy-tailed, I'm pretty sure Heather would send me to the doctor. Anyway. Maybe not. So before we get involved in the nuts and bolts of this thing, I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, do you have a bit of cash to invest? Number two, do you have the time to do research? Just like every other aspect of real estate investing, it not only takes a little bit of cash, but it does take some time. And I think the more time that you put into it, the more astute you're going to be with what you're investing in. Do you have a computer with internet access? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. You know, in today's world, I have met people that have no computer and they don't have a smartphone. I got to tell you, it's a little refreshing, actually. You know what I mean? What did we do 30 years ago? Well, I know what I was doing, but we won't talk about that. Do you prefer high interest rates over property ownership? That's one of the advantages that you're going to see with tax lien or tax deed investing, is that you're going to be able to be paid a return, but you're not going to necessarily be a landlord. Okay, so that's of benefit to some of you. Do you mind not having monthly cash flow from your investments? Do you mind not having monthly cash flow from your investments? This is unlike a a single-family house or an apartment building that you're going to rent out, that your tenant is going to be paying rent, you're going to be paying the expenses, debt service, and then you have the cash flow that's left over. That's not the case here, or at least sometimes that's not the case. I should state it that way. Do you like the idea of setting and forgetting your investments over the long term? If any of these things sound enticing to you, really take a look at some of the material today, because I think for some of you this may be a good way to kind of put at least a part of your investment plan on automatic pilot. Okay? Pretty fancy, huh? I got to do that again. Yeah, you know. At the Steve Martell Group, we use the highest form of technology we can. You know what I mean? If you answered yes, you should consider investing in tax liens. Now, you're going to hear me, like I said, say tax liens, say tax deeds, or tax certificates. I'm going to explain the difference between tax liens and tax deeds. When we say tax certificates, it's kind of an all-encompassing description, okay? Just so that you know that. So what resources do you need to be successful in tax liens? The first one is time. And I would kind of recommend that for everyone. If you're investing in single-family houses, apartment buildings, whatever it is, I think it's important to budget your time. A lot of people think investing in tax liens or deeds is something that you don't have to put much time in, and that's not the case. There is a lot of research that goes into this type of investing, and you're going to see that as we go along. Money is another thing that you're going to need to invest in these liens or deeds, depending on what state that you're investing in. So you might want to do somewhat of a resource check. Credit, I think that credit is something that could be used. It doesn't have to be used. And the reason I put credit up here is a lot of people take an equity line or home equity line from their house where they're paying 4 or 5% interest. If you could invest that money into something that's paying you 12, 14, 16% or higher, that'd be a pretty good investment plan where you're working out the spread. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I put that up there. Do you have the ability to obtain large sums of cash quickly? Do you prefer property ownership rather than earning high interest rates? Are you comfortable investing in areas outside of your local area that you may not be as familiar with, which all of you do since you're investing here in the States? All of these questions here, again, play into the idea of if you do have some large cash that you have set aside and you want to get a little bit higher return and almost put that thing on automatic pilot, I really think you should take a look at this. Do you hate haggling to get the lowest purchase price? A lot of you have spoken to me about the offer and putting in offers and negotiating and things like that. Some of you may not be the best at that, and I understand that. This is a way that you can avoid that haggling, avoid that negotiation process with your deals. And do you have the time to do the research? So we're going to be talking about the tax lien deed process and the ability to spend the time understanding what properties are up for tax lien, what properties are up for tax deed, depending on the state, and really getting an understanding of the quality of that asset. And you'll understand why that's important as I go along here today, okay? Do you prefer a quick turn, to quick turn your properties or hold them for long-term monthly cash flow? These are some of the things, again, that I think you need to ask yourself. And again, there's the high-tech stuff with these questions here that I know you're just blown away by. It's awesome to me up here, and I'm close to it. So again, I'm going to start to break down the differences between tax deeds and tax liens. There is a difference. When I talk about tax certificates, again, it's all encompassing, okay? I just want you to get familiar with that. So what resources do you need to be successful in tax deeds? I did the tax liens. These are the ones for the tax deeds. Time, money, and credit. Virtually the same thing. Oops. Virtually the same thing. Now you must be wondering, well, what's the difference? What are you talking about here, John? Because they seem very similar, but obviously there's a difference to them. So we're going to go into that here. Before I do, however, I want to explain how they get to this point in the first place. How does a property go to a tax foreclosure and then either become a tax lien property or a tax deed property? Okay? I want to make sure that you're fully understanding that. So, well, let me back up here. A tax foreclosure is just like a bank foreclosure. A bank foreclosure is when somebody has missed their mortgage payment for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. They will get usually what is called an NOD from the bank, notice of default. You've heard that term before? Okay. So when they get a notice of default, that actually goes to the owner of the home, but it also goes to the county and it gets recorded. That's how you can get a preview of foreclosures to come, because this NOD gets recorded. And if you do research at the county of all NODs that were recorded in that month, it'll tell you who's going to be foreclosed upon in the next 60 to 90 days. Well, the same type of thing happens with tax foreclosures. Instead of a bank foreclosing on the property because of non-payment of the mortgage, the county, which is typically the governing institution that monitors this, the county is going to send almost like an NOD to the homeowner. Hey, you haven't paid your taxes in a year, 2 years, depending on the state. If you don't pay your taxes by such and such date, something will happen, depending on the state, tax lien or tax deed. We're going to go into that in a second. So the foreclosure on the tax side of the world is very similar to the foreclosure on the bank side of the world. It's because you haven't paid something, okay? Now, different than a bank, because a bank is a private institution. When somebody that owns a home or an office building or apartment building or whatever doesn't pay their taxes, that becomes an issue to that municipality. That municipality depends on that tax money coming in to pay for police, fire, garbage, city services, that type of thing. So I want you to kind of think in your mind, it's more of a necessity for that county government to get that money than maybe it is for a bank that's going through foreclosure to get that money, because city services depend on those things happening. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? So what they do is they've come up with a plan, either by tax lien or tax deed, to say, if we create a system where a private individual or a corporation comes in and buys this tax liability, we're going to pay them a pretty good return back, but that will ensure we get the money to have these city services move forward. Police, fire, garbage, all that stuff. Does that make sense to everybody?